Okay, it is just preparing. So I think you have to go into my Jacqueline Gray Rose Facebook profile to see that we're there.
Let me have a look.
1 minute, let me turn the sound off. And then if I go into my Facebook and I can share it directly into the group. So 1 second, and I will try and do that as we are live and everyone is watching us do all the technical logistic stuff.
There's always the fun bit, isn't it? Making sure all the tech runs.
Exactly. It always takes a couple of minutes. You don't really have a choice. Okay, so let me see if I can share it directly into Yoga Teachers Forum. Just bear with us while I am trying to get it into the, here we go, Yoga Teachers Forum. And okay, Gabby, do you want to just check out the Yoga Teachers Forum and see if you can see it there, me sharing it into there?
Yeah, it's in there, it's going. We are there.
Okay, great, and we are recording it. So after this live, the recording will go up. But if you are here watching us and you want to ask any questions or put any comments, you can do that in the chat. If you want to join us at the Yoga Teachers Forum, in the feed there, you will see this live conversation. And Gabby, I'm handing it over to you. I was just the tech organizer, but you're the hostess.
Okay, I'll introduce us. Hi everyone, my name's Gabi Parkham. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a yoga teacher and what I've decided to call an LGBTQIA+ equity educator and consultant, which basically means I do stuff like this, and I run courses and trainings and workshops about making yoga and well-being spaces more welcoming and friendly and safer for the LGBT+ community. And I'm really excited. This is the second conversation that I've done with Jacqueline, so I'm really excited to kind of build on all of the stuff that we talked about last time. If you haven't watched that, I think you can still I think it's still available through the Yoga Teachers Forum, so you can go back and watch that one as well. Jacqueline, do you want to introduce yourself?
I will introduce myself. I am Jacqueline, Jacqueline Rose, and I am I have a couple of different things that I am. I am a yoga for pregnancy and birth teacher, a yoga for women's health teacher, a therapeutic yoga teacher. I am also a menopause coach, a passionate women's health advocate and specialist, and a hormonal health expert. And I also do trainings at the Yoga Teachers Forum focused on women's health, hormonal health, fertility challenges, PCOS, and endometriosis.
Just a few things then.
Things, yes.
So I wondered, do you want to start, because we had the idea to do this conversation because you came to me telling me a little bit about one of your clients. So I wondered if you wanted to start by telling that story to kick us off.
Okay, definitely. So as a result of our friendship that has started through the Yoga Teachers Forum and the first conversation we did about fertility in the LGBTQ+ community, I started becoming much more aware of the language I was using, the terminology I was using, my students' state and sort of where they were coming from, their backgrounds, how they were coming to the yoga for pregnancy and birth classes that I was running. And really very karmically, is that what we say? That in the pregnancy, yoga for pregnancy and birth preparation class that I did in October, November, one of my students was from the LGBTQ community. She was pregnant and her wife was there with her, supporting the journey. And as a result of my interaction with her, I realized that when you are working with a pregnant person in front of you that is coming from a slightly different background to the traditional, conventional, woman who is normally pregnant in front of you in your classes, I all of a sudden had other thoughts, other realizations, a whole different level of awareness of how I wanted to engage with her and the questions I wanted to be asking her, and even more so the sensitivities that I wanted to be having about her journey to becoming pregnant, and more important, her partner's journey in the pregnancy. And I remember after that experience, I called you and I spoke to you and had a really interesting conversation about it, because I'm ashamed to say, or not ashamed to say, that this was really my first time of not working with a woman who was pregnant and who had a female partner, or a partner who has a uterus and identified as female, but the awareness, my level of awareness was totally different. Not theirs. It was me that had changed in making space for their unique situation, because, as you know, and as I'm sure we'll talk about, when a identifying female in the LGBTQ community goes through a pregnancy journey, it is an emotional journey from the minute she decides she wants to get pregnant. And if she has a female identified partner who is joining her on the journey, there was a whole nother layer, emotional layer, that was there in the lessons that wasn't there. And it was just fascinating. So yeah, that's where sort of this conversation really bore its roots.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe I'm gonna assume that people watching this don't know very much, so I'm sorry if I'm saying things that you know are obvious, but I think it's worth going over some of the groundwork of if what you've been working with is women coming into a pregnancy yoga class who either have a husband or a male partner, got pregnant at home the easy way, and you're not thinking about this. Some of the things that I immediately like to bring to the table are the people coming into a fertility class or a pregnancy or a birth class or a postnatal class or even a menopause class. Any of these things are people whose bodies have the parts of the body that they can do that with, so people with a uterus, who may identify as women, and we would refer to them as cisgender, or may not identify as women. They might identify as non-binary, or they might be a trans man. And then their partner, again, will have a variety of different identities depending. So if you've got someone with uterus and their partner has sperm, then they might be getting pregnant at home the easy way, just like everyone else in your class. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the person with the uterus is a woman and the person with the sperm is a man. Equally, you might have someone coming to your class whose partner doesn't have sperm, and so that immediate, from the moment that that couple or that family want to grow, there's something that they have to do. They can't just start trying at home and after a few months or a year or so go, oh, hang on, this isn't working, which if you've been working fertility is probably the model that you're thinking about. They tend to have to go, okay, hang on, we want to get pregnant. We have something missing in terms of the gamete, either sperm or eggs or uterus, depending, and it's going to take us time and money, potentially, to make our family happen. So I think that's one thing, and I know we talked about this a bit in our last conversation, just that extra awareness of what someone might be coming into your class with.
So I think what you said is really interesting and really important for a yoga teacher who is teaching pregnancy and birth, or anyone who is supporting, any health professional who is supporting the pregnancy birth journey, is that something, and I say this not in any derogatory way, but as you said, something is missing in the the regular easy way that a fetus would be conceived. Either there is a uterus missing, or there is a sperm missing, or there is an egg missing in the equation to try and get pregnant, which means that for these couples, their journey to creating a family is already different at the get-go. It is already emotional. It already has a level of stress that other couples may not have. It already has a level of potential complication, cost, lack of understanding. Before they even walk into your yoga room, there is already layers and layers that they are bringing with them.
But also, I think if someone is coming to you, I don't know, maybe they're going through a fertility journey and having IVF, that might be that they've spent 2, 3, 4 years trying to get pregnant. Or it might be if they're part of the LGBT community that actually this is just day one. And yes, okay, there's cost and stress involved, but actually it might still be quite positive and exciting. And they might be thinking, 1 round of IVF and I'm done, or 1 IUI insemination and I'm done. So there's this kind of mix of it is in lots of ways more stressful and difficult, but also there's different baggage, I suppose.
Yeah, and you're 100% right. Anyone who is coming to specifically fertility yoga or yoga supporting fertility classes, there's going to be layers there, 1,000%. Yeah.
And I suppose the same in a pregnancy yoga. A pregnancy is precious for anyone who wants a pregnancy. A pregnancy is a really precious thing, but it's something that we don't know when someone walks in. Someone might have, there might be a same-sex female couple, but they might have got pregnant on their first IUI and actually it was all very easy. And they might be a straight heterosexual cisgender couple who it took years, and we don't know. So I like to go back to what are the assumptions that we make about people walking into the space, and it's really good to have an awareness of what someone might have gone through, but we can't guess how they're going to feel about it, I suppose.
The thing that I want to mention to you, which was the things that I was coming to awareness about through my work, specifically this time, was 2 specific issues. One related to a same-sex female where both people have uteruses in the couple, and same-sex where neither of the people have a uterus. So in the first instance, in my particular case, the woman that I was teaching has the uterus, was pregnant, and her wife has a uterus, was not pregnant. And the way that I offered during my course, I offered towards the end a couples session, so that everyone can bring their partner in and to see what they've learned, so that when they actually get to, the moment of truth in the delivery room, or if you're birthing at home, wherever it is, the partner knows what to expect. And I, offer this, and I always offer it, but sometimes, especially when it's a heterosexual couple, the husband usually is sort of dragged into the couples session and whatever. But this woman, I'm going to call her Sally just because we want to, to give her name and whatever. Sally said, "Oh yes, she has been desperate to get involved. She said this to me. This was her phrase. She would come to every lesson if she could." And it was at that moment that I realized it was just logistics, or whatever their decision-making process was, that the partner was the one that was not pregnant and Sally was the one that was pregnant. And that the partner's journey came with its own emotional challenges, or I don't like the word baggage per se, but came with its own emotional challenges, because in theory she could be pregnant. She is identified as a female, as feminine, with very feminine, stereotypical emotions, and she was relating to the pregnancy from a very feminine perspective, because that is how she identified. So there were two identified as feminine people in this relationship, but only one was pregnant and one was going through it, and the other one wanted to support her as much as she possibly could. And that was sort of an awareness of like that partner, which we typically see as the man, that comes with typical male interactions with his wife being pregnant, and all those very stereotypical, maybe very judgment-filled sort of connotations of what that, you know, looks like, wasn't present in this couple. And that, I think, is something that we need to be really, really tuned into.
And I think I remember when you told me this, it clicked with me, because it makes total sense to me and my relationship and my friends and the people I know, but I hadn't necessarily like really clocked what that difference is. And I think, you know, it is stereotyping. It's definitely not everyone. There are definitely cisgender men who are really involved and want to be, and there are definitely people in queer couples where the partner is less interested. But I think there is definitely something different where at least in my experience, the partner of someone who's pregnant is really keen, really wants to be involved, wants to do everything they can, partly to support their partner and also to kind of bond with the baby before they're born, which is hard to do if the baby's not inside you. So I thought it was a really good wake-up call to me that actually I need to add that lens to a lot of the work that I do.
Yeah.
So maybe should I talk about that a little bit?
Definitely. I just want to add in the extra layer to that, which I want you to relate to also, is the opposite situation, where there are two sperm-producing people in the couple, and they want a child, and they need to do that using a uterus, you know, that they need a uterus involved.
Yes.
And assuming that they are involved in that journey of the female carrying their child, the female person is going to all the yoga things, all the doctor's appointments, all the this, all the that, all the everything. And where is the space for these two male identified people to accompany her along the journey of bringing their child into the world? And in a yoga class like mine, and again, in a very stereotypical, as inclusive as I could possibly make it, but still very conventional, you know, class, if this surrogate woman was in my class, she really is just the vehicle. She has no, you know, she's, and the emotional attachment is from someone totally different. And so it's just another layer that, you know, my train of thought went to that, the other side of the equation also. So
yes.
maybe you can speak to both parts of it.
Yeah, okay, I'll do one at a time. So I think, well, for anyone who was assigned female at birth and was raised with that, you're a girl, you will be fruitful and multiply and make a big family, and everyone has their own response to that societal pressure. But I think even for people in queer couples who someone's decided they're not going to get pregnant, I think there's a bit of that residual stuff of like, what does it mean to be the other mother, the one who didn't do all the things that society is expecting you to do? And this comes out, you know, I've heard so many horrible stories of doctors, nurses, schools saying, oh no, I want to speak to the real mother, because the real mother is the one who gave birth to the child, and the other parent is somehow less than, which is awful and horrible and often dangerous, because you know, if a couple has done reciprocal IVF, it might be that the non-gestational parent, the one who wasn't pregnant, is the one who's biologically related to the child.
Yeah.
So, you know, looking at, and sometimes it's the medical team who need to think about, and actually, is this screening about the genetics of the parent, or is it about the person carrying? But it's something, I'm on a lot of the kind of LGBT parenting Facebook groups, and it's a conversation that comes up all the time. I'm the person carrying, I'm really worried about my partner, they're finding it difficult, they're feeling that they're being left out, how can I include them? Or my partner is carrying, I want to be included, what can I do? So I have had, I mean, this is back when all of my pregnancy yoga was on Zoom. I did have one couple where the partner really wanted to come to the classes, and on Zoom I felt that was absolutely fine. And so that was great, and the partner didn't come every week but did quite often and did the practice, and I taught the class in pretty much the same way I always do, but it just gave them that experience of what their partner was going through.
The question is, how would a yoga teacher feel having that partner in a real live class? And not even how would the yoga teacher feel, but how would the other participants in the room feel? But not in any prejudiced way, just in a very practical, we're all pregnant doing these exercises, what's your role here?
Yeah, and I think I can't give anyone an answer about how to handle that. I had someone's the person who was pregnant brought their mum to the class, but it was a one-off. Partly for me at the moment, the class numbers are so small, I don't necessarily have space for the extra people. And there is something, if you're thinking about, you know, how do we create that lovely safe space for the people in the practice, having other people who aren't pregnant might not always be appropriate. I do, similarly to you, Jacqueline, I run mine as a 6-week course, and the last week partners come, and it's a partner practice, so it's not the person who's pregnant does a shape and you sort of stand and watch and help. You do it all together, and everything, pretty much everything everyone does. So that's...
I mean, I will tell you myself, as a non-pregnant yoga teacher that practices together with my students, I will say to them, now we're going to roll over, and I'll roll over, and they're all bringing their bed over to the other side of the mat. Now, I've been blessed to be pregnant, so I know what that means, to bring the bed, you know, like, I'm just rolling over, I'm doing all the stuff. And I say to them, you know, I'm showing you how to do the movement, how to do the practice, but I don't have a belly that is interrupting the movement. So how you do it may look a little bit different. And that's fine. I'm the teacher and I'm demonstrating. But if there is someone in the room who is doing it with them, again, if there are practices and things that are specifically for the couple together, for the birthing process, for being in, you know, during contractions, etc., that's fine. But I could understand why we would really need to think about how we do this in a way that feels that we protect the safe space that is the class.
Yeah, and I think also for some partners, if they were coming regularly, they might feel like the class isn't really aimed at them. Like, I want to be talking about all the stuff relating to being pregnant and birth and bonding with your baby, and that's all really relevant. But actually, if you're not pregnant and you're coming and you want a yoga practice, pregnancy yoga might not be the one you want. And I don't want to have to start all up, okay, well, if you're not pregnant, do this. And if you want, like, I'm not teaching you. If someone's not pregnant and they want a yoga practice, they need to come to another class. So I think, I don't think there's a right or wrong, but I don't think there's a right or wrong, but it's something to think about.
I think for me and for anyone listening to this discussion, we want to raise the awareness. We want, you know, for myself as a yoga teacher and as someone who's on the journey of learning, I want there to be an awareness that these are things we need to know that may come up. These are situations that we need to be prepared for when we have an inclusive class.
And also, you know, how wonderful is it that there's someone who's pregnant whose partner wants to be so involved and know everything that's going on and be right there to support them. Actually, don't we want all of our clients to have a partner who's that supportive? Like, in some ways, I think maybe the straight world needs to learn a little bit from queer pregnancy of like,
yeah,
that's what we want. So there's an element of can we also use our practice and our classes as a way to encourage all of our clients to bring their partners? And
yeah.
I don't do it now, but so my classes, we do the yoga practice and then I have a different guest speaker each week. So it might be a lactation consultant or a doula, a hypnobirthing teacher, a pelvic physio, loads of different stuff. And again, back when it was all on Zoom, I got the partners to join for that talk at the end every single week. Now, it doesn't work in person because it's just not practical for someone to come to a yoga class just for the last 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But actually, it was really lovely because it meant all that extra knowledge was shared and they could have their little conversation as a couple. The partner could ask questions. It was really lovely.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to make sure that I'm doing a session where partners are welcome regularly, so that still becomes part of the way I work.
I don't want to keep going back into societal language and patriarchal language and stereotypes, but I do think that there's still, as we've talked about, and the more you're talking about this sort of part, like, you know, maybe the straight world needs to learn from the queer experience of being pregnant, there still is, as far as we have come, there still is the gender assigned roles of the woman gets pregnant and the man, I'm there to support you, darling. I will be there and I'm not going to go anywhere and you can squeeze my hand as much as you want and I'm in the room and I'm cutting the cord and I'm doing all these things. But at the end of the day, it's the female experience. It is the wife, the mother, the female partner who is going through that journey, and the male partner can never understand, can never really go through the experience, however much they are supportive and connected and involved. And I think that you're right, like, as far as we've come, as much as we've broken down barriers and as much as we've developed the language and, you know, changed the stereotypes, it still is so deeply embedded in the narrative and in the way that the heterosexual couple experience pregnancy and birth.
Yeah, and I guess there's something just immediately disruptive about doing that within an LGBT family. Like, I know couples where one person was pregnant and the other parent induced lactation and fed the child, and the pregnant parent never breastfed or chest fed. They weren't interested, and that's a really lovely way of sharing a big part of that child's early life.
Yeah.
So I guess, yeah, all the expectations that society has, we can start to undo and break down.
Yeah. Gabi, tell me a little bit about the workshop you're doing in February.
Before we do that, shall I talk about 2 sperm producing people?
Oh, please, yes.
So, and I'll also say the reason we're using this language of 2 sperm producing people, which doesn't sound always that nice, is because
it sounds functional.
It does sound a bit functional, but it's because those 2 sperm producing people might be men, but they might be non-binary or they might be trans women. So that's why I like to use that language of the real crux of what we're talking about in terms of fertility and pregnancy is the very, very one of the very few times where actually, like, your biology and your genitals are relevant. I don't tend to talk about genitals very much in my yoga classes and my work with the LGBT community, but this time it is relevant. So it also might be relevant for a couple where one person has had their uterus removed, would be a similar situation. So it may be the statement more as a couple where there's no uterus. But anyway, so I'll also mention, obviously, some people will adopt, but for the purposes of what we're talking about here, if you wanted to have a biological child, you would need to use a surrogate. I've had surrogates in my pregnancy yoga class. That was a really wonderful experience. And it also made me really have to think about how I teach, because I like to bring in elements of, connect with your baby, feel the love flowing between you and your baby, maybe picturing that moment where you hold your baby for the first time, that sort of thing. And for a surrogate, that it's not their baby. So I had to think about how I use that language, and how for the rest of the people in the class that stuff is still good and still useful, and how to hold that space. I haven't ever had intended parents in my class. I think, as we've already talked about, I think it would be difficult to have intended parents regularly in the class, although if I had a surrogate and I was doing a partner session, then of course those intended parents would be very, very welcome. But it's something that I don't know how it works in other countries, but in the UK, in terms of the NHS, the person who's pregnant would have access to NHS funded antenatal courses, but the intended parents wouldn't. And actually, although elements of those antenatal courses might be helpful for the surrogate, they're probably much more helpful for the intended parents who have, in the UK, if you can't really be a surrogate unless you've already had children. So if you've already had children, you know how a lot of this stuff works. The intended parents kind of want to know that.
Yeah.
So,
and the surrogate isn't going to be dealing with the sleepless nights. So
exactly.
Need to figure out what to do.
And it means often they end up having to pay for private antenatal classes. And if they've already had to pay for IVF, maybe more than one round, it's just yet another potential cost. Mm-hmm. But I think I found I deal with this maybe more than I have had I don't call my classes postnatal, I call them either bring a baby yoga or something like that. So I have had parents in my postnatal classes, either intended parents or parents who didn't carry their child. Mm-hmm. Because actually that space, if you're the person who's on parental leave and you're looking after your child every day, being able to go out to a class where there are other parents and other babies and have that space is really important. And so many of them are very mummy focused, like all the mummy and me yoga.
Mummy and me, yes.
So for me, it's really important that those classes especially are open to any parent or any caregiver, really. Mm-hmm. And that obviously means I still have a lot of people in those classes who have given birth, so the movement aspect still needs to be safe and helpful for them. But actually, if you're holding a crying baby all night, everyone has tight shoulders. Doesn't matter how you're feeding that baby, everyone with a baby has like a sore back and tight shoulders and has not had enough sleep and just needs to be in that space. So that's something that I suppose I've thought more about. Have I covered enough of that? Have you got more questions about that?
No, I think it's good. I think that we are really hoping that we're revealing the layers of the onion of what is going on here. I think that's sort of an important part of it. So tell us about your workshop in February.
Yes. So I've been running for over a year my welcoming LGBT plus people in yoga workshops. It's a 3-hour training. So I've got that on the 11th of February. And what I've added, and this is the first time I'm doing it, so I'm really excited about it. I've added a 2-hour, I've called it aimed at pregnancy, but it's kind of pregnancy and postnatal and fertility and menopause and all the stuff, like all of this stuff. I mean, even things like women's yoga would come into it. Any of the aspects of yoga that have been traditionally quite gendered. So that you have to have done the first 3 hours to be able to do the kind of add-on. So if you already done my 3-hour training, you can come and just do the afternoon, or you can do it all in one day. And what we cover, so the morning we'll look at a lot of terminology. I try to make it fun and interactive and it's not too dry, but we look at kind of all the acronyms and what all the words and the labels mean and how to use them. We look at history and experiences of LGBT plus people and kind of statistics, so we get a picture of what's happened in the past and what's happening now. We look at how to make classes and studios and workshops safer and more welcoming spaces. So some of the really practical stuff you can do in terms of marketing, in terms of the actual physical space if you're in a studio, in terms of your language in a class. And we look at allyship. And actually the allyship is kind of my favourite bit, because it's the broadest. It refers to allyship in terms of anything. So yes, allyship in terms of the LGBT plus community, but also allyship for any marginalised identity. So that's all in the morning, it's jam-packed. And then in the afternoon, we're gonna look at the kind of gendered pregnancy specific language. So a lot of people probably have seen recently conversations around pregnant woman or pregnant person, chest feeding, breastfeeding, all of that kind of language. So we're going to clear up some myths about that. No words are banned. Of course you can say breastfeeding. Of course you can say pregnant woman, obviously. But we'll go into when you might want to use different language. And also, I like to do a section around how we talk about the body. So, for example, in my classes, I might talk about the pelvic floor. How can I talk about that in a way that is going to feel comfortable? How might you talk about the chest, breasts, breastfeeding in a way that might feel more comfortable? And then we're going to actually get some practical time to practice that. So we'll go off in little breakout rooms and actually practice teaching this stuff, because it's all very well me sitting there and saying it all at you, but if you've been, for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years been saying pregnant woman breastfeeding, or to change that language sometimes takes some practice. So I really like to do that in that safe container that we can practice together, get it wrong, help each other, get some feedback, and then kind of take that on. So that's
I know that I've definitely done that with you, that I often will send you a WhatsApp or a message and say, what is the appropriate terminology for this thing that I want to say in my workshop that is going to be more inclusive?
Yeah, and I get so many questions like that, which I'm happy to answer, but it's really good to do it in that space, partly because I've had it where I've finished a workshop, everyone's left and one person stayed like, oh, can I just ask you one question? And then it was the golden question that I wish everyone else had been there. So that's the overview of my workshop.
Cool. So while we're talking about questions, I have one question to ask you, and then maybe I'll tell you about my workshop in March. My question is for children of non-binary parents. Even just the phrase "mommy, daddy," that may be something that we don't even realize may be, something that they don't really use, or that a parent may not feel comfortable with that terminology. So what is there, are there names that children refer to their parents by that are not gender specific?
Yeah, so what I often say with a lot of this is it depends. There are non-binary people who are very comfortable with mum and dad, and there are people who hate it. The only way to know what someone wants their child to refer to them as is asking them. So that's always my go-to. Ask the individual person. But in general, I've heard lots of lovely kind of names that people have created. So Mappa, Maddie, Baba, lots of words like that are quite common. You'll often see there are some families where maybe there are two mums, and one will be mummy and one will be mama or something like that. But to those kids, those two words, although we hear them as almost the same, those words are totally different. And I've seen really, really cute young kids being like, no, that's not mama, that's mummy. Really angry at you for getting the wrong one.
That's really fascinating. Yeah, that the child knows, the child who is using the name, for them, that is that person. That name embodies that person, regardless of what the actual physical name is.
Yeah, and often a lot of parents will kind of wait and see what their kids use. So a lot of LGBT families will have one parent who has a completely random title name that they're referred to as, that makes no sense to anyone else, but is this, has an adorable story, and that the child has created it. So I think that's really cute.
Okay. Cool. Thank
I
you.
was wondering, because as you know, you've been on this journey and we've had lots of these conversations, I wondered if you wanted to talk about how it's changed how you approach your workshops, because you mentioned, you'll sometimes ask me, I want to talk about this, what language should I use?
Yeah. So part of my training is very deep, cemented in the world of yoga for women's health. And that for me was sort of my frame of reference. Women's health, women's anatomy, feminine language. And that is sort of how I've been practicing and teaching and engaged in supporting my students and my clients, really from that very conventional framework. And then when I prepared, when I've been running these courses, the courses that I run here, as I said, it's going to be a 4-part workshop in March. We're putting all my courses together in one bundle package, is women's health and hormonal health, fertility, endometriosis, and PCOS. And they are very feminine, heavy topics. They're very women-centric topics. And from speaking to you and the awareness that I've got, I've now realized that, okay, what am I saying? How am I saying it? Am I being as inclusive as possible while also being as specific as possible? And how do I refer to certain things? And that, for me, because the work I'm doing, and because sort of the space I live in as a yoga teacher, as a women's health specialist, is so gendered, it's been really, really interesting for me to get the language right, to get the tone right, to make sure that it is still gendered, because I am focused on people with uteruses, with reproductive organs, with the feminine reproductive system, with feminine identifying hormones, and sort of one of the tips that you've given me is to stick to biological anatomical language rather than gendered language. So often I will use gendered language, but I will always say at the beginning, I now sort of have a very big disclaimer at the beginning that I am talking about, as an inclusive way as possible, but unfortunately, because of time or flow of my workshop presentation, or just conventional language, I will use woman, female, feminine. But it has really made me much more sensitive to the fact that this is the space I live in, but it is now so much more layered for me, and I have such a much deeper sensitivity to being aware that my audience may not be your stereotypical, woman with breasts and a uterus and female hormones who has been identified as a female since the day she was born. Like, it's just a much deeper awareness now, and sometimes even for me, it feels wordy, or it feels like I'm trying to find the right word, which is the right word that I need to get to make sure that I'm on a learning curve. You know, it's still, you know, despite all our conversations and the awareness and everything, it's still, what is the right word? Making sure that I am as inclusive as possible, while also wanting to get the information out there in a succinct way as possible. Yeah.
Well, yes, 100% yes. And it doesn't have to be perfect. I think so many people are so worried I have to get it right all the time. People make mistakes. That's normal. And I make mistakes all the time. And actually, I think if you're trying, learning, adapting, doing that work, and you get it wrong, which we'll all do, people let that go. No one cares if they know you're trying to make your work as inclusive as possible and then you slip up, or you use the language that you've been using for the last 30 years, because that's just human. And actually, I watched the recording of your fertility challenges workshop, and yes, you did the disclaimer at the beginning, but then you talked about specific challenges within the LGBT community, and you talked about, like, you mentioned it throughout. So, and sometimes you have to talk about, if you're talking about, you know, statistics, most of the statistics say women. You can't extrapolate that to say anyone with a uterus, because we don't know that. That's not what the research was. So I think it's getting out, there's so much bad press about this whole idea, like woman is a bad word and you can't say it anymore. It's just rubbish. It's just finding your voice with it. That I can't give you the exact words to say, because I just say it my way and you've got to find yours. But it did, yeah, for me, watching that training, that's what came across, is that you're learning, you're trying to make the space as welcoming as possible, and that felt really nice.
Thank you. One of the things I've learned from you very much is to ask the person in front of you, because there are so many nuances and it's such a personal decision what the person chooses to call themselves, how they choose to identify, how they, you know, all that is such a personal decision. You can't speak for someone else, and you repeatedly say to me, well, ask the person in front of you, what do they want to be referred to? How do they want you to, you know, interact, or what terminology do they want you to use? Or so I think one of the pieces of advice that I want to give to yoga teachers that is coming from you, that you have said to me, is ask the person in front of you what their preference is.
Yeah, and that's not just the LGBT community, that's anyone. Anyone might have preferences around the language they like to use around their body, or what their kids are going to call them, or any of that stuff. And as long as, I always like the caveat of, as long as you're asking something that's relevant to what you're doing, and because sometimes people ask questions just because they're curious, and will ask something that's too personal or not appropriate. So thinking about what information you actually need. But yeah, it's really relevant if you're going to be talking about someone's body or someone's family to check in with them what the right language is. Yeah. Do you want to tell us when your next workshops are coming up as well?
Yes, so in March, as I said, I have a 4-part workshop that is being released every Sunday. So every Sunday in March will be a session, but you sign up for all 4 sessions. So the first one is women and hormonal health. The second one is looking at PCOS, polycystic ovaries, and how all of them within the lens of yoga. Each session is a theory, the presentation, the understanding, the biology, the anatomy, what's going on, the physical, emotional, mental health journey that the person is on who is going through these challenges. So the second session is PCOS, the third session is endometriosis, and the fourth session is general fertility. And then, so each session is the theory and then the practice. How do you, as a yoga teacher or therapist or health coach, support the person in front of you who may be experiencing any of these issues, with a deeper understanding of what they're going through, and how do we use yoga as the tool to help support them on their journey.
And can you sign up for just one of those, or do you have to do the whole 4?
Yeah, so you sign up for all 4. If you already took that, we've now packaged it as a bundle. These courses were available. I did run them in 2021 as separate individual courses. So if, for example, like you, Gabi, you already did the fertility course, but you want to sign up for the other ones, there will be a discount for those people who did one already and who want to now do the others as part of the bundle. So if you, for example, joined my polycystic ovaries course and now you want to do the other ones, there will be a discount for you, but otherwise you have to sign up for all 4 as part of the bundle.
Wow.
Yes.
Shall I leave us with one thought and then we'll close up?
Yes, please do.
So just before we started recording, we were having a bit of a chat, and I asked Jacqueline, like, how many cisgender women go through fertility treatment, because I wanted to see if, particularly if you're working around hormonal health, fertility, and that sort of thing, what proportion of people. So you said that according to the CDC, 6% of married women are unable to get pregnant after 1 year of trying. And I've worked out there's not great statistics around the LGBT community, but I've worked out, I think, around 5 or 6% of the population are LGBT plus people who are interested in growing their family in the next year. So if you've got 6% of married women and around 5 or 6% of the population who are also LGBT wanting to get pregnant, that actually doubles the amount of people you could work with. So I think sometimes there's this idea that, like, there's this little tiny group of weird people over here, but we don't need to worry about them. Actually, particularly if you're working around fertility, because as we said at the beginning, so many people from the LGBT community will need to have support with growing their family. Not everyone, but a lot. I think that's just a really big underserved community that if you're interested in working with us, with me, with the LGBT community, there's so little support available, and it would be amazing to have a bunch of really knowledgeable, fertility trained yoga teachers to support the LGBT community. So if you're out there, if you're watching this, like, yeah, I want to do that, then you need to come to both my training and Jacqueline's.
Yeah, and I think that for yoga teachers who want a more inclusive space for their students, understanding that the person that walks through your door may not be that stereotypical, person, but actually may be coming from a slightly different, nuanced background, and just having a more subtle sensitivity to the people that are in front of you that you're serving and working with.
And I think that's such an important point. You can't tell from looking at someone. You just can't. I have so many of my friends who go through life and go into yoga classes and just won't mention that they don't want the pronouns that people have assumed, or whatever it is that someone's assumed from looking at them is wrong, because it's effort to say that to someone. But if they can see that you're trying to make an open, inclusive space, that goes so far to make them feel more comfortable to tell you.
Yay! Thank you, Gabi. Thank you so much for this opportunity to talk to you again.
Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing your journey with all of this stuff.
It's always great to do it with you.
Oh, and you.
Everyone have a fantastic evening, and we will put the links to each of our courses in the comments below. So we hope to see you there.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.